In 1956, the radical anti-Bolshevik group, the Situationist International, published an essay entitled A User's Guide to Détournement. The essay begins with the assertion that art is dead because, due to innovations in the realm of production, all known means of expression are going to converge in a general movement of propaganda that must encompass all the perpetually interacting aspects of social reality. The Situationists believed that the culture itself was in a state of civil war, and that through détournement, for example, the redubbing of D.W. Griffith's The Birth of a Nation, so that it became a polemic against the Klan, would be a radical gesture worth making, even if the prospect of cutting up and rearranging classic films to create new expressions of a sublime resistance was more alluring. This approach to politics, the aim of creating disruptions to the pervasive reformist and conformist brainwash that defined the spectacle of modern life, became more and more pervasive as the 20th century moved along. Punk rock, advertising, and American art music all took up the Situationist injunction to turn mass culture against itself. Nearly 30 years later, the radio jammer Don Joyce, from the collage art band Negativland, explained what American approaches to détournement could do on the Negativland album JamCon '84.
As awareness of how the media environment we occupy affects and directs our inner life grows, some resist. Some resist. Some resist.
And in 1989, Cale Lassen and Bill Schmaltz would found the Adbusters Media Foundation in Vancouver, British Columbia. They began publishing Adbusters magazine, an anti-capitalist publication aimed specifically at critiquing consumer culture. In 1993, the summer issue included essays on Zen TV, on cyberspace, but the feature piece was on culture jamming, a practice that the publication claimed was a new kind of activism. More than a publication, the Adbusters Foundation went on to spearhead many activist campaigns, including the annual Buy Nothing Day, the Black Spot Shoes campaign, and perhaps most famously, Occupy Wall Street. And about a dozen years after Adbusters was founded, a performance artist calling himself Reverend Billy played himself in an anti-consumerist film entitled Reverend Billy and the Church of Stop Shopping. The message of the film and the theater group was the same. We are addicted to shopping and must break the habit. While Guy Debord and the Situationist International had originally wanted to use détournement to intensify a revolutionary struggle that they thought was already raging, the culture jammer Bill Talon's message was one of moderation. We should spend less, buy local, be willing to pay more, and be mindful of the environmental effect of our personal consumption. The question was no longer, can we overcome capitalism, but rather, can we stop shopping? Which, when adequately understood, really meant, can we be more ethical consumers? Hello Zero Books viewers and readers, it's me again, Douglas Lane, and in this video I'll finally touch upon what is often called the socialist calculation problem by taking a critical look at the Frankfurt School, the Situationist International, and Frank Furedi's upcoming book, Democracy Under Siege. Furedi has been a consistent champion of people's capacity to assume control over their destiny. His book is a thoroughgoing defense of democratic ideals, and his commitment to democracy, or to people power, has led him to be wary of Adbusters-style critiques of consumerism and mass culture. In his book he wrote, "The moral condemnation of mass culture often serves as a roundabout way of highlighting people's alleged conformity and gullibility. According to this view, mass society produces a type of mass man who, lacking the habit of independence, desperately seeks to conform the prevailing sentiments. Deficient in judgment and the ability to understand the issues of the day, mass man is said to be easily manipulated by unscrupulous politicians, advertisers, and the media. This notion of the pacified masses gobbling up manufactured reality and abdicating their own responsibility to shape the world, the idea that people exchange their freedom for a bottle of Coke or a Facebook account, is not new. The Frankfurt School philosopher Herbert Marcuse described the masses as passive in his book One-Dimensional Man back in 1964. He wrote against the fetishization of technology, against the notion that technical or scientific understanding and the power that it brings could come along with freedom. Power and freedom, according to Marcuse, were in contradiction. Marcuse called our ability to fulfill our material desires through the transformation of the natural world technics, or alternatively, he called this ability by the name reason. When we think of the corpulent Walmart shopper ambling down the aisles looking for a deal on donuts and handguns, when we condemn him for his stupidity and conformity, we are also condemning the social relationships that have produced him. Our disgust with the corpulent consumer is also disgust with what Marcuse realized was really the shape of our own power. According to Marcuse, we have overcome nature, and through this, we have reduced questions about what kinds of qualities we wish to realize into quantitative questions. The argument is that by subduing nature with scientific rationality, we have transformed questions with emotional resonances, questions such as, what is a good life? What is the nature of justice? What is beauty? Into math problems. The question isn't, what sort of man should the Walmart shopper aim to become, but rather, what sort of donut should he consume, and in what quantity? If you enjoy these videos, you should click on the subscribe button and hit that bell. Even better, you might consider supporting us on Patreon. Our patrons get access to all of our podcasts, including 2 new series, one on Rosa Luxemburg's Reform and Revolution, and the other on the communizer Gilles Dauvé and his book From Crisis to Communization. Starting in August, we will also be introducing a monthly podcast series on Trotsky and the Russian Revolution for patrons. Support us on Patreon and join us in learning critical theory with the aim of changing society. When Marx was alive, back in the 19th century, there was no such thing as an Orange Julius. He died 9 years before the Coca-Cola Company was founded. This is perhaps one explanation for why Marx could imagine that the increased power of production under capitalism would lead to the transcendence of capitalism. This is why he could imagine that the contradiction inherent in relying on the expansion of the power of capitalist production to create the conditions needed for socialism could be sublated. In The One-Dimensional Man, Marcuse argues, like Marx did, that as our technical power expands, our scientific reason is confronted with the task of becoming political. Conversely, this means that our politics are tasked with becoming scientific, technical, and reasoned. To reiterate, the problem with the masses is not their enjoyment of donuts. It is not their hedonism or the possibility that they might become placated. Rather, it is only in so much as we all take the limited pleasures we find at Walmart to be a natural and technical limit. Only when we demand nothing more from our scientific understanding than a better laxative or a more delicious sugar substitute that we become trapped within consumerism. In previous videos, I've promised to solve what various right-wing libertarians have called the socialist calculation problem. That is, the problem of how to adequately calculate what should be produced in order to meet everyone's needs. There have been various attempts to solve this historically. Some socialists have suggested that the direct calculation of labor hours and outputs would be sufficient, and in this way we can transcend capitalism by consciously using a labor value to direct our production rather than relying on the market to do our calculations for us behind our back. Others have suggested that instead of calculating labor hours, we should calculate calories or other energy inputs and outputs. And in my novel Bash Bash Revolution, I imagined that a combination of hours played and scores amassed could be used to direct production if all of productive activity was mediated by augmented reality video games. Clearly, more debate and thinking is needed. But if this is to be a fruitful debate, it will have to take place within the context of a political project to transform the social aim of what Marx would call the mode of production. Regaling people to stop shopping, decrying the backwardness of the masses and their tastes, only serves to obscure the technical problem we're facing. Thanks for watching this Zero Books video. If you enjoyed it, subscribe to this channel and click on the notifications bell so that you'll be alerted whenever we release a new video. You should also consider supporting us on Patreon. Our patrons get access to our Inside Zero Books podcast every week and can get access to the Zero Books Book Club and help us to continue making online content from the left.